Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. So welcome to the John Schultz podcast. We have a friend and a guest today. His name is Dan Rowe. He's CEO of Fransmart and a fellow YPOer. I know we both love YPO. That's how we met, which is great. And Dan is amazing in the restaurant industry. He's been on all sides. He's been a franchisee, a master franchisee, a franchisor, consultant strategist, an investor, and even a cook, I hear, which I guess if you're that much into food, you have to love cooking. He's sold over 5,000 franchises worldwide. I said 5,000, not 500. He's launched franchise programs for concepts like Qdoba, Five Guys, the Halal Guys, Slapfish, and our friend Brooklyn Dumpling Shops, which, right, most recent one, which is taking the country by storm. Not only does Dan consult, help, grow businesses for other entrepreneurs, he's an investor, and he's invested in brands like Sweetgreens, Cava. So in politics, Dan, there's this thing called the kingmaker, right? I think we were going to call you the brand maker, and it's true. You've made so many people be able to see the ability that they could be successful in something that they love, which is food, service, hospitality. I know, I'm proud of what you've done as a friend, and you should be very proud of yourself. And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So as we all know, this podcast, we like to hear what everybody's doing, how successful they are, but we like to see sort of the story of how that became. So my first question to you is, in another interview, you said the dot-com bust got you into franchise industry, got you into the industry. Why? Like if you're into technology, that seems like a divergent path. How'd that happen?
I mean, it's funny because you just talked about a bunch of my wins, but the truth is there's bigger list of misses, right? So, and we rarely talk about those, but that's where I feel like I've learned everything. But yeah, I was a cook and a dishwasher growing up, and loved the restaurant business, loved feeding people. I got into technology, into growing mainframe software companies. I hated it. I didn't like data centers. I didn't like technology. I didn't like anything about it. It wasn't as cool as it is maybe today, but it was these dingy, dark data centers, mainframe. And then quickly I got into medical management. The only thing that I hated more than software was working in a hospital. And so, I was 23 years old and actually became a franchisee. And there was a concept that had a couple of stores. They had 6 locations in Washington. My buddy and I and his wife bought the franchise rights for another YPO, bought the franchise rights for Colorado. And we made a deal with the franchisor. We said, we're going to prove your concept clear across the country. And if it works, we also want to do your franchising. So it worked. We were successful and grew them from 6 stores to about 200 and then sold it. And that
was your first gig. So you tech, obviously you had an interest, and what's so interesting in life is, like, unless you try and see what you don't want, you never know what you want, right? So you had tech, you said the hospital. I agree with you. I never want to be in a hospital either if you don't have to be, yet it's such a necessary thing in our society. But you're 23 years old, Dan, right? Most people go get a job. I mean, I know you were a dishwasher working in kitchens, and I think, to be good at anything, you got to start from the bottom and really learn why and how things get done. But you need courage to be able to actually make a move to be an entrepreneur. So as a 23-year-old, how did that evolve for you? I mean, I guess you had this other friend you just said you did it with, but what inside you made you feel confident enough Was it your family? Like, what gave you that boost?
I didn't think I could do anything else. So I was a terrible student. I barely got out of high school, never finished college. I went to college a little bit, but all of a sudden I was 20, 21, 22, and my buddies that I grew up with were starting to get out of college and go get real jobs. And all of a sudden it dawns on me that like, I'm not on that path. And I was, so I got lucky the good part about working in the software company, even though I hated technology, I got to work for this guy who launched software companies. And so really I learned how to grow and build a company and raise capital and do all that other thing at a young age. But truly, I mean, I became self-employed at 23 because I figured that was my only path.
So interesting. I think a lesson to the audience, especially the younger audience, was something you just said, especially in post-COVID, where we haven't all been around each other. If you weren't around that person, you would have never been able to sit there and watch to give you that confidence, which enabled you to actually start this franchise. So I'm hoping people realize that it's the osmosis learning. It's the being around and hanging around the hoop, for no better expression, that actually sometimes gives you your biggest courage point to be able to do something. And that seems like that's what happened to you, right? It wasn't what you were in, but you saw someone doing it and that you said, wow, I can do that. And you actually did it. So it went from 6 to 200 stores, right? What was the key factors you learned being so young and only maybe knowing so much about operating a business that enabled you to scale so quickly at a young age with this concept? Like what were those factors?
Honestly, I thought I was dumb. I thought I was not very bright. And we were successful, like clear across the country. We picked a location. We knew nothing about that. We picked a location and it was a home run and our stores were doing well. And we're looking at ourselves saying, we're idiots. Anyone can do this. And we wound up selling a lot of franchises to a lot of people thinking, anyone can do this. And it wasn't true. Like one of the reasons we were successful is we were working 15, 18 hours a day. And we just thought that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
But we worked really hard. But I noticed there was a lot of people that we sold franchises to that thought it was just an ATM machine that you just plug it in and it makes
works.
And we all learned the hard way that wasn't the case. And so I remember my second brand was Qdoba. And I'm like, we're never going to do that again. We're never selling a franchise to someone who doesn't know what they're doing or doesn't have a plan or, is more thought out. And I know at Qdoba, we only had one store at the time. One of my shops was in Chipotle, is in Denver, across from the first Chipotle. And then we couldn't work. They didn't want a franchise. So we worked with Qdoba, but Qdoba had only one store open. And, but the difference is we said, look, we're only going to sell these to people that already have multi-unit franchises. They're already successful. Oftentimes we'd fly to the city and go look at their businesses and go see how they ran their Papa John's or Popeyes or whatever it was, because that was going to be an indication of how they were going to run our franchise. So, but that was sort of the truth is we just went for it. We made so many mistakes along the way. We got sued and, alleged fraud and misrepresentation and all that. And then imagine you're in your 20s and, I'd never been in court before. And all of a sudden I'm looking at all these legal filings calling me the worst person in the world. It was it was not fun. And we worked our way through it. And we just said, if we do this again, we're doing it different. And that sort of put me on a different path.
So what was the key? I mean, I'm while you're saying this, I look at, McDonald's came into my mind, right? Like the Ray Kroc book. I don't know if you read that, how he basically systematized everything so it would make it easier to scale. Would you say that's the model? Like what would you give people advice if they wanted a franchise on what they need to know and be to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, franchising is a business of systems, no doubt. That's all it is. So don't get into a franchise if you think you're going to change it or if you think you're going to alter it. follow the system. But beyond that, you have to want to show up every day. I mean, owning a business, think about a restaurant. I mean, you could have 364 good days a year. One bad day winds up on Yelp and, Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And so it's like, not only do you have to buy the system, you got to show up every day. You got to take care of your employees. If you're not buying yourself a job, you want to own multiple franchises, you better have a good team and you better treat your people well. So there's sort of a lot of lessons that we learned along the way.
What's the average time span a restaurant actually stays in business? I mean, because you've been involved around this industry so many years. What's the ability for real success in choosing? Like, how do you choose what's a good concept to get involved in, so people can understand that?
I look for concepts. I mean, first and foremost is the numbers, right? Numbers don't lie. People vote with their wallets. And so like, do people already go to this concept? Is it already busy without me doing anything? Like, do people organically, naturally like the concept? Because I can always tweak the costs and drive sales, and I can do these other little levers. But at the core, if people don't like it, that's a really big deal. And then there's other things like, are you at the beginning of the curve or sort of at the end of the curve? Because every concept has a life cycle and beginning, middle, and an end. And I mean, with some exceptions, but like, where are you? Can a franchisee make enough money that he wants to reinvest and open up more restaurants? Like, that keeps their focus on the game longer. There's a lot, but a lot of it is driven by numbers, by then the systems and processes. Is it an easy paint by numbers way to follow to get yourself to, a scale?
Is that what you've been working on? I mean, being that you launched these brands, obviously you probably had a lot of iterations of how these franchise operations work. Like, would you say you're at the pinnacle now of someone wanting to get involved and it's a much easier due to the technology? I mean, there's so much technology now that allows you to do things more efficiently. Would you say that's ingrained in the restaurant industry concept and, franchise business at this point, or not yet?
It is, absolutely. So there's technology that helps predict real estate, where you're supposed to go, not only where you should go, but how many other competitors are feeding those people. You can get sales from your competitors. There's so many things that you can do about that. And then there's technology that drives, guest experience. There's technology that drives trial and repeat and all. I mean, there's all these tools in place that we didn't have when I was starting. There's so much, and franchising really works both for the franchisee and the franchisor with multi-unit. So nobody gets rich by buying themselves a job. You have to have a franchise that makes so much money that you want to take the profit and reinvest it in more stores. And a lot of times you have to delay gratification a little bit. Like, don't just take all the money out of the first store the first couple months, put it in the business and go build a couple more locations. And then at some point, you'll get to that point where you can self-fund growth and pull all the money that you want out of the business. So our biggest aha was, this is a business where you only are going to get rich helping people get rich. Franchising doesn't work the other way around. It's got to be okay that your franchisees make a lot of money. And so, the economics have to support a franchisee that wants to keep opening up more stores. You and I know franchisees, and it's like, they keep opening more stores. They keep buying more stores because that math works, right? There's the systems and the processes to make it easy. But at the end of the day, you could have the best systems in the world. If it doesn't compel you to reinvest that money into more locations, it's done. So
yeah, listen, it's hard to manage, right? The labor, there's a lot that goes into, systems or not, creating a great business, a service business.
Worth it. It's all got to be worth it. So like, you've got to put up with, like right now we're dealing with supply line issues and inflation and labor issues. It's like, yet we're writing more business than ever. We have existing franchisees that keep buying more territory, right? Because it's just such a good opportunity. If you can crack that code, restaurants are making a fortune right now.
So, and how is that? Is it pricing power of the product? Obviously, because you can't have inflation and not increase your price. Are you seeing that restaurants are actually able to increase their pricing at this point? How's the customer feel about that? Is it only certain brands? I think this is something that we're all experiencing now that's new for all of us, right? We haven't had inflation in 15 years, right? So what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, all of our brands are raising their prices. And I preach it. I post every 90 days, some other, usually public company who's raised their prices. And it's the only way to do it. Even before the inflation, before COVID, you had to raise your prices at least 5% a year just to keep up, right? Rent goes up, salaries go up, all this cost goes up. And so you have to do that. In New York, where you're at, if you notice, I mean, it's depressing in a way that you drive up and down the streets and there's more vacancies than ever, right? And so you've basically got a supply and demand imbalance the other way. Before COVID, we would argue there's too many restaurants. Now that's not the case. And all around the country, you've got basically, you have the same number of people who live there, same number of people who work there, with the exception of super, super urban. But you have the same number of people in a trading area, but you have less people feeding them. And so you have that supply and demand imbalance. But
it's very interesting. That's very interesting to say that. This is what I've sort of learned. It's just, where are people? Because the people that were eating Midtown are now living and working at home more. Yeah. So they're spending more of their time where they live. It's almost like we're gonna have to rebalance where all these restaurants and amenities are as we get through this post-COVID world and what it really means. Because at the end of the day, if you go down to Soho and these other areas, there's more restaurants and other concepts that weren't normally there because people were up in Midtown, during the day. So it's going to be interesting to see how all these cities deal with sort of the population and where it went based on, work from home or work in the office. But we'll see. So for you, picking a winning franchise is obviously, like you said, you probably never know. It's sort of more of a gut feel. It's what the people think. You had your aha moment, but can you talk about you now? Because you're the successful person we have on this podcast that's been around for 30 years, and it took a while to get to where you are. What would you say you realized in your career why this was truly something you should be doing? Like, when was it? 23, you're figuring it out. And what was the one thing that catapulted you to the next level in your mind, in your career?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I don't think I knew I wanted to do this forever in my 20s. When I started, I just started, and I figured, and I moved to Washington, D.C. from Southern Cal to Washington, D.C. to go run franchising. I figured I'd do it for a couple of years and then go back to Southern California and figure out the next move. But for me, it was kind of weird. It was like, I mean, I had this weird cocktail of imposter syndrome and faking it and trying to look like the man, because I barely got out of school, didn't go to college. All my other friends are taking off. I was, I went back to my high school reunion, here I'm making $500,000 a year. I'm making $500,000 a year for a guy in his 20s, but I'm spending $501,000, right? So like I had no money, like it was just a facade, and it was sort of this weird thing that I was going through. And our model is that we share not only in franchise fees, but the upside of the franchisors. I never focused on that. I never focused on really where the wealth was in this business. I focused on the upfront sort of vanity metrics, right? Or the things that would make me look and feel good today. And it wasn't until I was probably, I mean, honestly, if I've been doing this for 30 years, it was probably 10 years into it before I started to realize that, I mean, and part of it was YPO. I mean, basically get into a forum and they're like, wait a minute, your company allows you to do what? And you're only focusing on this. And it just got in my head. Like there was a lot of noise in my head that I just didn't feel like I was supposed to be successful. And I didn't feel like I was supposed to be as successful as I was. And then it finally started to dawn on me, that part I said earlier about, I want to get wealthy, helping people get wealthy. And that's it. It's like, I do deserve it, because I basically changed my prism to, I can get as wealthy as I want, depending on how many other people I help get wealthy, right? So, and I think as soon as I changed and started focusing on that, my life turned around like crazy.
That's
All areas,
amazing.
yeah,
That's
all
amazing.
areas. I mean,
Yeah. So,
you know,
so what you did is you changed the, like you said, prism, dynamic, whatever you want to call it, on making it bigger than you, right? And getting rid of, I guess, that self-consciousness you had that you
yeah,
weren't good enough. Yet, like anyone else that would have looked at you during those times would be like, how the heck can I be like Dan, right? And I think that's what people have to realize, as successful as all of us are, we're all human and we're all going through struggles and issues that we all have to work through. So when you sort of make it not about yourself, it just makes you all in all, I think, have this confidence and feel better, which is awesome. That's it. So would you say that was your most significant struggle? What would you say? Okay, so that's maybe a personal struggle, which I like that you're and you have great humility and vulnerability to actually talk about this. What would you say was your most significant business struggle to break through that next like Dan level?
I was very insecure. Again, going back to me not feeling like I was worth much, that manifested itself into the kind of people I hired, right? So I didn't want to hire amazing superstar people. I was intimidated by people that I thought were better than me or smarter than me. I ran off people. Like if I brought in somebody and they were really good, I would get insecure about that. And that was not healthy. And so all of that, I governed myself, right? A governor, right? You put a governor on something. I basically governed my own success because of the story I was telling myself, both personally and professionally, relationships. I mean, it manifested itself in all of those ways. Wasn't until I said, you know what, I'm going to get, and I started to realize it's like, God, I can make as much as I want helping other people succeed, including employees. Like I could hire the best and brightest in the world. They're going to raise the tide. The tide lifts all the boats, including mine. Right. And it's a weird thing, but it shouldn't have taken me as long as it did. But I mean, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of self-sabotage that goes on in the industry. Look at celebrities and athletes, and I'm just as guilty as any of that.
So being that you've been around this, you sort of been like pretty good at picking winners. I mean, I know you've had a lot of losers, but you've also, I guess, over time, because you're involved in so many, you're going to have some. Why didn't you ever create a concept that's yours? Like what made you not go down that route? Because I'm thinking about this. I'm like reading all these things that you're involved in from the beginning. How come you didn't go that route? Was it that you always felt like you had to be moving and doing deals, or you didn't want to just like what caused that?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I've always been attracted to concepts that had an authentic soul or an authentic DNA. They actually really came from somewhere, right? The five guys, mom, dad, and five boys, the halal guys. There were really these three guys that came over from Egypt. When I was at Qdoba, and I'm proud about Qdoba, but when I was at Qdoba, all we ever talked about was getting table scraps from Chipotle. That was it. Like it was a copycat brand. And I'm just not convinced. I'm not convinced that that's the right road for me, is to go start my own concept. Because I would start a concept because I see halal guys being successful. I'm going to go create my own halal brand. It's like, well, I'm not halal, right? And so at some point, my employees are going to know that. I mean, there's something about it that's just not real. So I want concepts that are authentic, have real meaning, and like I'm doing and also it's like I find myself getting more charged trying to help people, right? Like I'm trying to help five guys, halal guys. So I'm doing this new project now. So I get introduced to Pitbull, the rapper. And he says, hey, Dan, how come there's no Mexican chains owned by Mexicans? How come there's no Cuban chains owned by Cubans? And it's like, that's a good question. And there's not. And so they're all guys that look like me that own Chipotle, Qdoba, all these brands, most. And so I'm actually working with him to identify Latin-owned brands, and we're going to give them the pathway to turn into Never Never Land. And in the process, we're going to create this opportunity. Think about who does all the work in the restaurant business. They're all people of color. They're all people of color. And if not for money, little bit of skill and some confidence, they would be better franchisees than me or people that, you and I know. And so we're basically going to change that. And so this whole idea that I have about trying to help create, it's going to be such a big project that's going to have thousands and thousands of locations, and it's a for-profit, but I'm not going to make money because I'm focused on making money. I'm going to make money because I'm focused on doing an amazing thing for a lot of people. Right. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's tremendous. It's so funny. I see your passion level raise when you just talked about that project. And like, just listening to you, the reason why in my mind you didn't do one on your own is because you would have been right back to that imposter feeling that you felt when you were a kid. It's almost like a trigger, right? Where the more you feel you're helping someone else, the more Dan Rowe is on fire. And this is an unbelievable project to be working on. I can't wait to hear more about it. Is this launching soon, or where are you?
We'll announce the first 2 brands like in the next couple of months.
And Pitbull is he the master franchisor? Like, unless you can't talk about it yet, but is he heavily involved in this, or?
He's going to, he runs a very big company. He on his own brand is a very big enterprise.
100%.
He's got a lot of really smart people with him. And so he and I are forming this joint venture that's going to go help these people. So we'll be investors, we'll raise other capital, me more on the franchise and development side, him more on the marketing side. Right. So, there'll just be a lot of stuff that we're doing, and it's being led by, you think about it, like I'm lowering my fees a little, he's lowering his fees, but we're basically going to, we think we're going to make plenty, but the part, like, I feel better when I help people. And this is like something that and I can tell he does too. Like he doesn't need any more money.
Well, listen, you're opening up a whole new genre of entrepreneurs. For our world to work, everyone has to feel they can be one, right? It could be one in your job where you actually feel you can grow in your company, or it could be where you want to be able to start your own business and actually have a chance to do it. And to actually get behind something like this is amazing. So where do you think the restaurant business is going? Being COVID, shut down, craziness that we all went through, I feel like COVID, no pun intended, unmasked a lot of things that we didn't realize were even in society and also in business and how we operate. I know in Brooklyn Dumpling Shops, which we both love that concept, and those stores are opening now. They created a new automat, right, which allows you to actually serve people differently. It's like bringing old school to new school with high tech involved. How they cook the dumplings is changing. I know you have Taffer's Tavern, you work with them, how he redesigned how the kitchen works. Where do you see the business going now post-COVID, as far as, is that stuff really going to matter? And where is it all going to end?
It's totally pervasive. Nowadays you have to feed people where they want to be fed, when they want to be fed, how they want to be fed. So you see Chili's and Famous Dave's now that have drive-throughs, right? And so with Brooklyn Dumplings, it's contactless, but it's the idea of you have to do more volume than ever in less square feet. More volume than ever with less employees, right? The only way that you can afford to pay employees is to have less of them. So you've got to fully leverage technology, and you fully got to leverage marketing, right? So like nowadays, the game, like I remember in the beginning of COVID, a lot of these celebrity chefs are like, we're not going to do to-go food, we're not going to do this, and they got wiped out, right? They got wiped out. The chains all got smart and figured it out. But I think what you're going to see is, and there will be some differences, but some exceptions, but for the most part, more volume and less square feet, more volume, less employees. You've got to sell the most profitable items just because there's margin pressure. So, you're going to see concepts that engineer themselves for that. And, you're seeing now, like there's a lot of restaurants that have their restaurant that operates during their normal hours. And then that same kitchen is basically a power plant doing ghost kitchens, right? And so it's a way of generating more revenue over a fixed overhead.
Would
So that's not going to stop.
What is the percentage, would you say, to be successful from delivery now? Because, you know, now you have Uber Eat, like everyone's doing it. And, you know, there's pressure on your margins with all of this stuff going on. What's the right balance? Where do you see the delivery to in-store, the pickup to not pick up? Like where is that ended now since COVID, post-COVID right now?
Well, it used to be a third, most fast casual, third dine in, third carry out, third delivery. Now it's 80% off premise. And I think that's not gonna end.
You really, so is that Fridays and Applebee? Like, is that, so there's fast casual, right? Where you can go in and you order. Is that where you're saying it's 80%, or is like, are people gonna want to go and sit down with their families and have dinner anymore?
I should have clarified. So in QSR fast casual, I think it's going to be 80% off premise. And full service restaurants where off premise used to be 4, 5, 6% of sales, I think is now you're going to see 15, 20% of sales. And I think that's not going to stop. So you're going to see more, like at Taffers, we actually built automats at Taffers. So, you know, Taffers is a full service 5,000-foot restaurant that's hoodless and ventless.
Yeah, tell the audience his show so we can maybe get him some
John Taffer. Yeah, John Taffer from the Bar Rescue basically came up in the middle of COVID with a new concept, kind of the next generation full service concept. He does 50% of his sales as beverage, which also helps the margins. And it's hoodless and ventless. And so he's doing tons of volume out of a relatively small space, about 5,000 feet. We're opening one in 2 weeks in DC. We're opening one in 3 or 4 weeks in Boston, but it's going like crazy. But he does a meaningful amount of off-premise sales. So you can actually get entree food ordered on your app, and it's sitting there in an automat. You don't have to go through the normal thing where you walk in and go to the hostess, go to the bartender who doesn't want to deal with you anyways. The automat.
Is it app-based too, where you can actually walk in and you know which automat door to get to? That's amazing. And so you see that a trend now, like if he's doing it, because I hate bringing those bags. They're sitting there. You know they're getting cold. Then you got to go reheat them. It'd be nice to know you could just pull your food out of your own box.
Right? You wonder who else is touching your food or taking your food. Like, no, this goes from the expo line into your heated locker, and it sits there. Nobody touches it until you wave your phone, and then the door opens. You grab your food and you take it off. We're doing it at Rise. Rise's biscuits and donut concept. It doubled its EBITDA during COVID. Double. Like he has 25 to 30% four-wall EBITDA margins, and it's all come from automating and getting rid of the cashier and then using the automats. Like they did it 2 years ago.
That I love. Listen, I love innovation. I know you do too. I love and you get, what's fun about your job to me is you get to work with all these like smart entrepreneurial, crazy founders, right? That come up with ideas that everyone says you're out of your mind, but that's why you want to be hanging around them, because usually something will happen, maybe not the way they thought. So I see you're also very relevant in your industry. Like, how did you, for people wanting to, help their industry, how did you find your voice in this industry? Did you like the give back I get for the franchisees, but did you get involved with young business groups? Like how do you find your voice if you're someone that wants to be more involved with the industry?
Yeah. So, but it started when early in my career, I was, because of that insecurity and feeling I didn't belong, like I was not nice to people. Like the relationships I had in my 20s and early 30s, it was all about me. It was about me trying to protect me and my, what's good for me. What changed is this whole thing about, I want to help people. I want to get rich helping people get rich, or I just want to help people just because it felt good. one of the things I did is I started mentoring people for free. People would come to me and like, they're not on the right track. I help put them on the right track. It feels good. I don't get anything for it, but a feeling. Did the same thing I got on the National Restaurant Association board. And it's just like, I love it. I love being on the NRA board because I get to help the whole entire industry, whether it's, raising money or advocating for some policy of protecting somebody, protecting our members. But it's like, I just like it. And I think what changed for me is when it went from me being about me to me trying to help people. And I think everything about my life changed. Everything about my business life changed when I just said, I need to help people. And it, like I said, I make plenty of money, but it's like, it's one of these things, like if I could do something without getting paid, I would be doing exactly what I'm doing right now.
Wow. That's a big quote to say and to feel. And it took time for you to get there, Dan, right? You had your ups and downs. I was going to say what keeps coming you back day after day, but like, you're just going to say, I like helping people. And I don't, like, if that's the message that people get from this podcast, like that always makes me feel better. I know everyone that I know that has a huge success has such a part of their mindset is like, how do I help that next person? Because you learn from that, right? You get teaching. When you have teaching moments, you're usually teaching yourself at the same time, right? Because we're all trying to learn every day. So so Brooklyn Dumpling Shops, what else? Because what else are you focused on that people should learn more about, right? As a concept, you said Rise. So what would you say they should look at?
Yeah. So, and we started to dabble with non-food brands, right? So like we have a concept that's based on Long Island, and it's a concept that's sort of like a you break it, I fix it, but it's new and used electronics. These places, and what I love about it is they're cheap to start. Like they cost under $100,000 to open. They do $2 million in sales and make better ROI than any restaurant concept I've ever seen. And that's growing across the country. And so it's just one more tool.
What's the name of that called?
Called Paymore. So Paymore.
Paymore. Okay.
And like they're, the franchisee down in North Carolina, I think he spent under $100,000, including his franchise fee, did $2 million. He's about to open his third now. And he's self-funding his own growth. And it's just like, I mean, you just look at him, he just looks happy and he looks fulfilled and he looks interesting. I mean, he looks interested in what he's doing, and it feels great.
That's great.
It's one more tool for us to kind of help people own their financial future, right? That's really important to me because it was important to me to be financially independent. I want to share that gift with as many people as I can.
Well, you are, and you will. I know it's not ending here. I know you. You are so all over, creating and making people understand that they can be financially secure. You've done an amazing job. I want to thank you so much for taking this time. Being an entrepreneur and having the confidence and the ability to know you can has just created so many unbelievable businesses and, families that have gotten involved and generations of cool, right? Of cool concepts. And that's what America has offered all of us, which we should all be grateful. So thanks again, Dan. We really are so happy we got to hear from you. And I know everyone's going to love this podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.